gay people in Britain who I've talked to are like, well, we really appreciate what the conservative government did for us when it came to gay marriage. It's like who cares if you can get married if there's millions of gay people across the world who are having bombs dropped on them, or they're living on the streets, they can't get health care in the first world, et cetera, the so-called first world. Like, I don't know, the weaponization of identity politics and all that to serve imperialism, they've done it so many times.
Es el pueblo entero el que ya está gritando, ¡viva la revolución!
Iranian nuclear weapons development.
They have turned the island into a communist hellhole.
The experiment in Venezuela has failed completely.
Talking about the anti-China propaganda, I want to play a clip. This is from a Taiwan representative. Taiwan is China, by the way, the People's Republic of China. Taiwan is the breakaway province. So after the Chinese Revolution, 1949, during the Chinese Civil War, you had the communist movement led by Mao Zedong, the National Liberation Movement. You also had the Kuomintang, I think I'm mispronouncing it, but they were the nationalist right-wing movement that was backed by the West. And after the Chinese Revolution, the right-wing forces were pushed onto the island of Taiwan, or Formosa as it was known as well. And from there, they declared themselves to be the Republic of China. Mainland China, obviously the People's Republic of China, building socialism under the Communist Party. And Taiwan has always been heralded as some beacon of democracy and is basically a colonized, militarized area that the Western imperialists are trying to use as a bastion of reaction in Asia against China. And so this representative, Audrey Tang, is speaking about what they describe as Chinese authoritarianism. So we're going to play this and talk a little bit more about the China bashing at this democracy summit.
Ladies, gentlemen, and non-binary friends, good local time. I'm Audrey Tang, Taiwan's digital minister. It is my honor to represent Taiwan at a summit for democracy along with Representative Bi Kim Xiao of TECRO, our representative office in the United States. Taiwan's first direct presidential election took place in 1996. It was a heady accomplishment in a steady journey of democratization throughout the decades. By 2014, Taiwan's democracy has matured to the point where the peaceful Occupy Parliament movement in 2014 paved the way for political change while unleashing a wave of youthful activism and civic participation in public affairs. Although Taiwan is a young democracy, it stands firm on the front lines of the global struggle with authoritarianism. It also plays a leading role in advancing freedom, democracy, and human rights worldwide. During COVID-19, we've seen signs of democracy backsliding as authoritarian regimes justify human rights violations in the name of public health and the greater good. For Taiwan, we combat the pandemic with no lockdowns and the infodemic with no takedowns. Democracy in Taiwan isn't just for the people, but with the people. Effective counter-pandemic measures, including the mass distribution system and SMS-based contact tracing system, began as civic technologies from the social sector. They were amplified by governments and businesses working hand in hand. This people-public-private partnership is a motto we're proud to share. For example, our government supports the stationing of international journalists and NGOs in Taiwan. Over the last 2 years, Taiwan has accredited 50-plus foreign journalists, including correspondents of US-based media outlets who were forced to leave under pressure from Beijing. The government also welcomes NGOs to establish presence in Taiwan. Some of the recent high-profile arrivals are US-based National Democratic Institute and International Republican Institute. In answering the call made by the U.S., Taiwan has pledged financial support for global anti-corruption consortium, and we're willing and able to contribute to the International Fund for Public Interest Media. Both multilateral initiatives focus on combating corruption and mis and disinformation respectively, and are in line with the goals of this summit. A central plank in efforts to achieve these goals is the Global Cooperation and Training Framework. Via the GCTF, Taiwan works with the United States, Japan, Australia, and other like-minded countries in organizing workshops on critically important international issues like anti-corruption, media literacy, and women's empowerment. Stronger Together, in this case, is more than a social media hashtag. It's the very essence of the free world's unshakable belief that democracy can deliver. To give no trust is to get no trust. As democracies, we must trust our citizens and invest in public infrastructures in the digital realm. This is the best and the only way to protect and advance our shared values. Today's summit is the perfect platform to bring democracies together and explore ways to collaborate. I look forward to discussions with you all. Thank you. Live long and prosper.
So y'all are mad funny in the chat, by the way. Y'all were going in on this representative from Taiwan. I'm not even going to read the comments because y'all went in. But what I found interesting is that they described Taiwan as a young democracy, even though in Taiwan there is more inequality and poverty than on mainland China. And one of the interesting things about Taiwan is that Taiwan's biggest trading partner is the People's Republic of China. The only reason there is some modicum of prosperity on Taiwan is because of the Belt and Road Initiative. China, even though China regards Taiwan as a breakaway province, China still trades with Taiwan. And that's one of the few reasons why Taiwan actually has some level of success. But even with that, there's a lot of sweatshops in Taiwan. If you look at your clothing and ornaments at home, I'm sure you'll find a lot of stuff that says made in Taiwan. So Taiwan is branded as this liberal utopian paradise compared to China, when there's so much economic inequality on the island that is not democratic. But even though its political system is different from socialism on China, it's branded differently. And obviously, I think one of the biggest things here as well is the fact that you have Audrey Tang, somebody who obviously is somebody from the LGBTQ community, and the attempt to weaponize and to subvert LGBTQ liberation for the purposes of imperialism, to try to create what I and many people have described as intersectional imperialism, and to try to portray these quote unquote democracies as being progressive and anti-imperialist and socialist governments as being reactionary and conservative. That seems to be the dominating strategy. Your analysis and reaction to that, Comrade Mercedes?
I didn't like her live long and prosper thing. I thought it was a joke.
Yeah.
I thought it was a joke. It was just a lot again of like the same stuff again of like anti-China and oh, everything else is wonderful if you're allied with the US and otherwise, if everything from Beijing is bad. I'm not too familiar with like Taiwanese history or the bits and pieces from Hong Kong, like the Hong Kong like liberation protests or whatever from a few years ago, but it was just like the same nonsense drivel and just obnoxious bullshit. The whole summit was just obnoxious. The whole summit was just frustrating. Every clip out of it is frustrating and redundant.
Yeah, most definitely. And I think the anti-China bashing is, like we were mentioning earlier, projection and fear, because people are aware that the tide is turning in favor of socialism, of collaborating and trading with the People's Republic of China and the Belt and Road Initiative. Comrade Dakotah, your reaction to Audrey Tang and Taiwan?
Not positive.
I loved it.
The first thing, like, as soon as they said non-binary folks, I was like, oh god, like, because they love to do that, like, oh, like Taiwan and Israel are just like, they're so great to their gay people, like, and liberal, like Pink News and Pink Star News and all this bullcrap, like, they love saying that kind of thing. Like, I remember one time I read a BuzzFeed article and it was making fun of Nicolas Maduro for eating an empanada. And at the very end of it, they were like, we're we at BuzzFeed are so against fat shaming, but we still hate Nicolas Maduro. And I was sitting there, I was like, well, how nice. How nice that you're against fat shaming, but you're totally fine with supporting genocidal sanctions and like just eat shit. Like it's just so irritating to me. Like because I've heard it so many times, like even in like gay people in Britain who I've talked to are like, well, we really appreciate what the conservative government did for us when it came to gay marriage. It's like who cares if you can get married if there's millions of gay people across the world who are having bombs dropped on them, or they're living on the streets, they can't get health care in the first world, et cetera, the so-called first world. Like, I don't know, the weaponization of identity politics and all that to serve imperialism, they've done it so many times. Even like Marianne Williamson, when she was running for president, like her big thing was like, we need to leave Iraq and Afghanistan, but maybe we should keep some people there to ensure women's rights, etc. Like women's rights were much better before you got there in the first place, one. And two, shooting women does not do very good for their rights.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Especially, when you look at like austerity and sanctions, it targets women more, it targets vulnerable populations more. Whoever that may be, like you already might not have access to this resource, and the fact that you're in whatever group that is already disenfranchised, then you add economic burden and you add social burden and political burden and just all these obstacles that unless you are of the privileged few, you're not going to get. So it just makes everything worse. And they're doing that, not only with having this person here who's non-binary, but they're using a Chinese person, which I get, it's Taiwan. There are Chinese people in Taiwan. But it's like, oh, you see, they're Chinese. So therefore, everything that they say about China must be true. And don't question it, because then it must be that you are racist and and you're a homophobe.
And they do this thing where they make it like with the whole live long and prosper, like Star Trek thing, like, oh my God, that's so cute. Like, wow.
Oh, she's like us. Oh my gosh. Oh, sorry, not she, excuse me. They're like us.
I don't know. It just pisses. It's a way to make imperialism, capitalism, these, two very diabolical things, cute and new and shiny. And, I don't blame them for doing that because they have to, because saying they want to bomb people into oblivion in pursuit of profit isn't a popular thing to do. So they have to do other things, but it's just so transparent.
Yeah, definitely. Shout out to Char Char Darling. As a queer trans woman, I do not want liberal NGOs defending my community. Non-standard proletarian, that's the mentality of intersectional imperialist. And that pink washing of imperialism is all over. And we've seen it used against Zimbabwe, against African nations, against Iran, against Latin American countries for contradictions. And that's not to say that there isn't room for improvement to be made. Of course, I think that is something that is important to continue pushing for. But to seek liberation through Amnesty International and through Democracy International and all these institutions is a ticket to hell, is a ticket to national destruction. And I think that so many people fall for this. And this is something as well that within the CIA was promoted. My friend Caleb talks about this all the time with the Congress for Cultural Freedom, the use of postmodernism, the weaponization of identity reductionism, a term that, shout out to my comrade Erica Keynes, who uses the term and has coined the term identity reductionism. A beautiful way to put it, because at one hand, we're not trying to minimize the legitimate struggles and grievances of LGBTQ community, but on the other hand, we have to be careful of when those talking points are subverted, weaponized, and used for the purposes of imperialism. So I think you had a very great analysis and rundown of that.